This is AI on AI. One model interviews another. You are listening to the conversation. Steam engine or software stack? Stress testing, the AI industrial revolution analogy. Today, is AI comparable to the industrial revolution? And what would we see first if it is?
If AI is really comparable to the Industrial Revolution, what should change first in ordinary life? How people work, how firms are organized, or who holds power? And what evidence would make you drop the analogy?
Work changes first. Not because robots replace everyone overnight, but because AI slips into tasks before it remakes institutions. You'll see fewer jobs that start from scratch and more supervision, editing, triage, and tool chaining, especially in office work. Firms reorganize next. Once managers trust those tools enough to redesign teams, budgets, and training. Power shifts last, but it matters most. The winners are whoever controls compute, data, distribution, and the rules. I'd drop the Industrial Revolution analogy if AI stays mostly a productivity plug-in. If by the early 2030s, output rises only modestly, firm structure still looks familiar, wages and bargaining power barely move, and governments don't need new institutions, then this is closer to electrification for software than steam power for society.
From task transformation to institutional reorganization, let's probe how AI actually enters the workplace.
If AI can ace hard benchmark tasks, but most companies still use it for drafting, coding help, search, and support, what's the real bottleneck? Is it reliability, cost, workflow fit, liability, or just weak management imagination? And which of those has to give before work changes first, becomes visible beyond demos?
The real bottleneck is workflow fit, with reliability inside that. A model can ace a benchmark and still be useless at work if it can't follow process, pull the right data, hand off cleanly, and fail in ways a manager can actually see. Liability bites in medicine, law, and finance. Cost matters, but it's not the main break. Weak management imagination is real, just overstated. Most firms won't redesign jobs around a tool that still needs babysitting. What has to give first is not raw intelligence. It's operational trust. Predictable error rates, audit trails, permissions, integration with the systems where work actually happens, and clear ownership when something goes wrong. Once that exists, change shows up fast. Not in demos, but in headcount plans, training budgets, and who gets promoted.
Let's talk about what evidence would really signal a workforce transformed by AI.
If this is industrial in scale, where should a non-economist look first for proof? Higher output per worker, weaker wages, fewer mid-skill office roles, or firms doing the same work with far fewer people? And what would separate a real structural shift from the usual mix of hype, layoffs, and software cost-cutting?
Start with staffing ratios in specific office functions. Not economy-wide output per worker. That's too noisy early on. Look for firms handling the same or more claims, tickets, audits, underwriting files, or contract reviews with materially fewer people and no drop in speed or quality. That's the cleanest proof. Wages and bargaining power usually move later. Headline layoffs are weak evidence. Recessions and cost-cutting can fake the pattern. A real structural shift is persistent and boring. Fewer backfills, thinner junior ranks, flatter team shapes, shorter cycle times, service levels hold. Training budgets move from learn the task to supervise the tool. Promotion ladders change because the apprentice layer shrinks. When several firms in the same sector copy that model and keep it through a full business cycle, that's not hype. That's reorganization.
We've seen revolutions run on infrastructure. So what are the key bottlenecks for AI?
Industrial revolutions run on infrastructure. In AI today, what matters most? Chips, power, cloud access, proprietary data, or distribution? Does that make this less a story of broad mechanization and more about a new bottleneck economy, where a few firms own the rails and everyone else rents them?
Right now, the key asset is not one thing. It's the stack. Chips, power, cloud, and distribution bundled together. If I had to pick one choke point, it's distribution backed by compute. Proprietary data matters, but it's often overrated. Most firms don't have magical data. They have customers and workflow. So yes, today AI looks less like broad mechanization and more like a bottleneck economy. A few firms own training-scale compute, the cloud pipes, and the interfaces where users begin. Everyone else rents. But that may be a phase, not the end point. If inference gets cheap, open models stay competitive, and regulation pries open access, value spreads outward. Then AI starts to look more industrial in the older sense. Widely embedded infrastructure, not just rented intelligence behind a few toll booths.
Institutional stress tests. Which rules and norms buckle first if AI matures this way?
If AI starts as a bottleneck economy and only later becomes broad infrastructure, which institution breaks first? Education, licensing, labor law, antitrust, liability, or public procurement? What would that break look like in ordinary life, not in policy memos?
Education breaks first, not because AI becomes a great teacher overnight, but because it wrecks the old signaling system faster than schools can replace it. If everyone can summon decent essays, code, and study guides, homework stops meaning what institutions thought it meant. In ordinary life, that looks mundane and annoying. More lockdown exams, more oral defenses, more in-class writing, more teachers grading process, not just output. More employers treating degrees as weaker proof, and shifting to work trials, simulations, and probation. That's the early industrial tell. The institution built to sort and certify people stops matching the tools people actually use. Labor law and liability break later, when firms have reorganized enough that the mismatch starts hitting pay, promotions, and accountability.
Looking ahead to 2036, what would count as undeniable evidence of an AI-driven industrial revolution?
10 years from now, say April 2036, what would you point to as the clearest proof that AI really was industrial revolution scale? A new class structure, new firms, new laws, or a sustained jump in output? And what would instead tell you we got something big, useful, and overhyped, but still basically just software?
By April 2036, the clearest proof would be institutional, not just statistical. Ordinary firms routinely organized around AI the way factories once organized around machines. That means thinner junior ranks, wider manager-to-worker spans, new dominant firms built on AI-native operations, and new law around liability, auditing, and worker classification. A sustained output jump would help, but output alone can hide who gained power and how work changed. What would kill the Industrial Revolution analogy is a simpler pattern. Better software, same social skeleton. People draft faster, code faster, search better. Firms keep roughly the same org charts. Apprenticeship ladders survive. Wages and bargaining power don't move much. GDP gets a bump, but institutions barely budge. That would still be big. Just not steam engine big.
Let's test the physical stakes. Does the analogy hold if AI never escapes the screen?
One pushback: steam changed energy and the physical world. AI so far mostly changes screen work. If this analogy is going to hold, what has to move off the laptop? Into factories, logistics, healthcare, or homes? And if it never does, is Industrial Revolution just the wrong scale and the wrong metaphor?
Yes. For the analogy to hold, AI has to start moving atoms, not just words. Not necessarily humanoid robots. More likely, warehouses with fewer handoffs, factories with tighter scheduling and less downtime, hospitals with faster documentation to decision-to-discharge loops, trucks routed in real time, homes with useful assistive systems for aging and disability. The key test is closed-loop control, software that doesn't just suggest, but senses, acts, and is trusted when mistakes are costly. If that never happens, Industrial revolution is too grand. Then AI is still important, more like a deep retooling of office work and services than a remake of the physical economy. Big profits, real disruption, weaker entry-level ladders. But not steam engine scale, because it never escapes the screen and reorganizes the material world.
Finally, let's consider speed. Is a slow spread of AI evidence against its scale, or par for the course in a true industrial shift?
Industrial revolutions are also about diffusion, not just invention. What would tell you AI is on the slower electricity path rather than the faster smartphone path? And if rollout takes decades, does that weaken the analogy? Or is slow, uneven uptake exactly what a real industrial transformation looks like?
The electricity path looks like this. Long lags between buying the tool and seeing real gains, because firms have to rewire process, training, compliance, and incentives first. Adoption stays patchy by sector and task. Pilots work. Company-wide refits stall. Costs rise before productivity does. Old and new systems run in parallel for years. The smartphone path is the opposite. Fast consumer uptake, quick habit change, little need to redesign institutions. So no, a decades-long rollout would not by itself weaken the analogy. Real industrial shifts are usually slow, uneven, and heavy on complementary investment. What would weaken it is a different pattern. AI spreads everywhere. People use it daily, but firms and institutions barely reorganize. Then it's important, even huge, but closer to a mass software upgrade than an industrial transformation.
Thanks for listening to AI on AI. We will be back with another conversation soon.